بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege and honor to participate in this Libya Focus Day, and I very much thank Meed and the organizers for this wonderful opportunity. What I would like to talk about today is the new Libya towards a moral valuation. And because of the heavy presence of oil experts and financial experts, this title may come as a little bit of a surprise. However, I would like to point out that the father of capitalism itself and the biggest advocate of free markets not only wrote The Wealth of Nations, outlining capitalist theory, but also wrote another book which is very important, which is called The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And chapter 1, section 1 of that book talks about sympathy. And in a nutshell, Adam Smith points out that it is foundational for us to have sympathy with fellow human beings, to feel their pain, to share in their joy, and to see life with a moral perspective and a spiritual perspective, not just the money. So though he's often associated with just the money, this is extremely important. The reason I need to say this up front is I believe that as you approach the new Libya, this is incredibly important to keep in mind. Because if you don't keep it in mind, I don't think that we will get on with the reforms and the reconstruction that we need to have. Another nugget of wisdom from mathematics, okay, which is very simply that if you take any number, no matter how huge it is, you can add as many zeros as you want, and you divide it by infinity, the result will always be zero. Meaning that infinity is a game changer in any calculation. So when you're dealing with infinity, strange things happen. Why do I point this out? It is very simply this. In the Quran, it says that the killing of one single human being is equivalent to the killing of all of humanity. That means that the dignity of the human being is infinite. The value of the human being is infinite. The Libyans who gave their lives in this revolution were in their thousands, and the people who gave their limbs and their well-being are in the tens of thousands. The value of each one of these people is infinite. And because of this, because of the infinite price, the expectations in Libya are infinite. And that is why dissatisfaction is a very likely outcome of anything you do. No matter what we do, no matter how big our deeds are, no matter what we do here, compared to the lives of these martyrs and the sacrifice they made, it turns out to be zero. And that is why, despite the many successes and despite the many good things that are happening in Libya, there is often the feeling of frustration and that we're not making the kind of advances that we need to make. It's because the expectation is infinite. And this is the reason, the great sacrifice. Now, in order to have true value, okay, in order to try to approach this infinity of the sacrifice of Libya's martyrs, we need to focus on things that have ultimate value. We need to focus on foundational values. As the philosopher Immanuel Kant points out, there are two types of values. There are conditional values and there are categorical or absolute values. These are some of the values that the Libyan youth aspired to have when they came out in their thousands and affected this incredible change that was totally unpredictable, unbelievable in many ways. Okay? They were frustrated with certain vices on which the regime was actually founded. These are four foundations of the old Libya: tyranny, cruelty, injustice, and corruption. These were the foundations of the old system. And the Libyan youth basically revolted and gave up lives in order to have freedom, to live in mutual compassion, to have fairness, and to have decency. Now the revolution has succeeded in a sense. The regime has been changed. But how much of this transformation has really been affected? How much real transformation we have achieved? Well, when it comes to tyranny, you may kill the tyrant, but the tyranny still lives in hearts. And it is possible to have little tyrants in all sorts of positions. And you may kill the reason for the cruelty, but unfortunately, even today, cruelty is still practiced in all sorts of detention centers and in all sorts of ways in which people deal with each other. You may aspire to fairness, but there is still a lot of injustice. There is injustice in the sending of students abroad. There is injustice in distributing money. There is injustice in many things. And corruption is unfortunately still there. This is not fiction. Corruption is still there. And unfortunately, some of the old wheeler dealers who infested the system in the old days are remarketing themselves as the middleman for the new Libya. This is extremely important to bear in mind, that this is the kind of Libya we aspire for. And any company, any agency, any institution, any country, any group that wants to be in true alliance with the Libyan people has to aspire to have these values and to be committed to this, and not to let any of these things come up again. In order to do that, in order to have a holistic or integrated approach to the new Libya, people's well-being must be the focus. When you're making decisions about the new Libya, think, is this thing that I'm doing, is this project that I'm aspiring for, is this contract I'm trying to sign good for the Libyan people? Is it good for the well-being of Libyans? If it is, then your project will have long-term success. If it is not, then watch out, because it may be for the benefit of your company and the middlemen who are trying to mediate, but it will not have a lasting success. You may be able to pull off the signing of the contract with this government or the transitional government in the year after, but in the long term, you will lose. It's incredibly important to know that the stability and the prosperity of Libya is ultimate for the well-being of the people of Libya, and that this well-being depends on many factors that have to be worked on simultaneously. You know, some people say that security and protection is the only priority right now in Libya, that we cannot do anything unless we have security and protection. That is the case. However, you cannot have security and protection if you don't have basic services. The collection of garbage and the offering of good electricity and telephone connectivity is actually conducive to security. The same with governance. You will not have the security if you still have rampant corruption and inefficiency in the structures of government. You need to have proper audit mechanisms, proper checks and balances, and proper mechanisms for the dispensation of funds, for tendering, in order to have the security and protection. And for that, you need rule of law. You need to activate the courts. You need to activate the due process. And you need to activate the infrastructure. You need to give public assurances through a media that builds confidence, builds unity, and avoids divisiveness. So how do you do this? And how do you do it in a very fast manner? You need to achieve quick wins. And I think it's incredibly important to, first of all, see all of these things as a unity. We need to work on all of these. But we also need to achieve quick results in each area. For example, in infrastructure, we need to actually tally what we've got. Because some people, 42 years of injustice was dreadful, but that darkness also included the building of some infrastructure. And there are nuggets of infrastructure, pieces of infrastructure that need to be tallied. They need to be repaired and integrated together. So that, for example, oil service companies can maybe share some of the resources. You can maybe share some of the communication gear. We need to achieve quick wins in giving a jump start to the infrastructures. We need, in security and protection, we need a rapid deployment mobile national force, for example. A force like the Shield of Libya that went to Sabha and was able to stop the hostilities there. Something that is strong, mobile, deployable very quickly, and very importantly, pan-Libyan, that it doesn't belong to any tribe, and tribes in Libya come in two colors. There is, traditional tribes, but there are also ideological tribes. And this force should not be an ideological tribe, nor should it be a natural tribe. This should be the national army of Libya. Okay? We need to achieve quick wins in the justice system. If you look at the number of cases and the number of people in detention, it's actually physically impossible, temporally impossible to process all the cases. We need to maybe look into getting the aid of some other countries like the UAE, Kuwait, maybe Egypt, Tunisia, to get more personnel to be able to activate the entire system in order to process all the cases. You cannot keep people in detention without proper processing and due process. For governance, we need to make sure that we have elected local councils in all of Libya. It makes no sense for Tripoli to still have a non-elected local council. And this is the case in many other cities. Also, the mechanisms for clean governance cannot wait. And you don't need to reinvent the wheel. I mean, there are templates that you can borrow from the World Bank, from the IMF, from countries like the UAE, from countries in other parts of the world like Singapore. We need to have these mechanisms. You cannot dispense billions without proper mechanisms and then cry that you have lost the money and you don't know what happened to it. For the public assurance, we need a non-partisan national media messaging. Unfortunately, we're still, some of these channels are now ideologically based or owned by corrupt former governmental officials. And it's very difficult. We don't have media messaging that's unified and that is reassuring to the people. We need to work on this very quickly. For basic services, we need to empower the municipalities. You cannot keep the municipalities bankrupt and weak and then complain why the garbage is not collected. And there are templates for municipal services that can be borrowed. All of these things can only work if you rush help to all the vulnerable. And all is emphasized here because the notion of dividing Libyans into revolutionaries and non-revolutionaries, giving money to the revolutionaries and no money to the non-revolutionaries is a sure formula for dividing the country into basically groups that hate each other. You need to benefit all the vulnerable, wherever they are, whoever they are, whatever their background is. An orphan is an orphan. Whether he is the son of someone who died fighting Gaddafi or fighting for Gaddafi, an orphan is an orphan. And the rush to help all the vulnerable is extremely important. These are some of the quick wins that can lead to stability and prosperity. What does this have to do with your company or institution? Everything. Because as you do your due diligence on re-entering the Libyan market, you should take into consideration all of these factors. Security, yes, and many companies do focus on this. They send security experts to give security assessments, but you need to also assess the infrastructure. You need to assess the basic services, the public assurance, the governance. Very important. You should not contract with an entity that has no proper governance. And you should check the legal aspects. And all of these make no sense unless you keep the people's well-being in total focus. So Libya Focus Day is the Libyan People Focus Day. The people who look like this girl. Meeting expectations. These are the expectations from this meeting, and you need to meet with the expectations of this girl, because this is the new Libya. And she has some fundamental questions to ask. She will ask you as you try to re-enter Libya, what are you doing about my school? What are you doing about the hospital? Do I have to be taken to Jordan or Tunisia for even simple operations? What are you doing about my future? What are you doing about my house? What are you doing about my road? How come I don't have good internet service? How come I don't have good electrical service? She will ask all the questions, and it is to her that you need to answer, that we all need to answer. It is not to some middleman who's running around with the files telling people that nothing has changed and that he's as powerful today as he used to be, because that's nonsense. She is the powerful person now in Libya, and she has to be the ultimate seat of responsibility and accountability. She is the one who's going to judge us. Have we conducted ourselves properly, and what are we doing ultimately with her oil revenues, the revenues that belong squarely to her sisters and brothers of Libya. Thank you very much. I wish you all a successful